Hello students. In the last lecture we were discussing about different type of properties of water. In continuation of that, today we are going to discuss total solids and suspended solids. Right? Total solids, the total amount of solids can be determined by evaporating a measured sample of water and weighing the dry residue. So what we actually do is that we use a petri dish and measure the petri dish. After that, what we do is measured amount of water is put inside that petri dish, and then what we do is put it in an oven and evaporate the water. When the water is evaporated, what we are left with is total solids. Then we measure the total solids along with the petri dish and reduce the weight of petri dish to find the total number of solids, right? So these solids are total solids. So what I am trying to explain is that total solids are those solids which are present in a particular amount of water, which include the suspended solid as well as the dissolved solid, right? The suspended solid are those solids which can be retained on whiteman paper. So what we do is the suspended solid can be determined by filtering the water sample and weighing the residue left on the filter paper, right? So we use a filter paper, and after using the filter paper, whatever the amount of solids which have been suspended in the water suspension, that would be retained on the filter paper. If we measure that, then what we will left with is total suspended solid. The dissolved solid will pass through the filter paper as well, because their size is very small. Their size is smaller than the pore size of the filter paper. So what we are left with is the total suspended solid, right? After that, if we want to calculate the amount of total dissolved solid, TDS can be calculated by a TDS meter as shown in the figure, right? Now the next thing is pH. pH is the negative logarithm of hydrogen ion concentration present in water. We have been studying pH throughout our life. So you all understand that pH of 7 is a normal pH, that is of water, and anything beyond 7 is basic in nature, anything before 7 is acidic in nature. So this is the pH of water. For different type of water, why is pH important consideration? pH is an important consideration because when we treat wastewater, the wastewater is seldom mixed with bases. For example, in a slaughterhouse, what we do is we provide a coating of NaOH over the hides for the skins, right? So in such industries where animal skins products are made, we use a lot of salts to coat them or to protect them from decaying, right? So in those industries, the wastewater will always be basic in the nature, right? And even that basic wastewater, if it is put directly into a water stream, it will affect the aquatic life. Also there are industries like the battery manufacturing industry and other industries where you find a lot of acid uses. So where the amount of wastewater has a lot of acids in it, that amount if left untreated and disposed of as a water side or in a river stream, what happens is the water will become acidic in nature, which will ultimately affect the aquatic life, right? So pH becomes a very important consideration while in the treatment of wastewater. So we try to maintain a pH between 6.5 and 7.5 before discharging our effluent, right? I have already told you that the amount of wastewater entering into a system is called influent. The treated wastewater that is coming out of the system is called effluent, right? So whatever the type and properties of influent that is coming inside a treatment system, we have to make sure that the effluent satisfies the pH conditions, right? So for that pH you can calculate on lab also, and pH can be used also by pH probe, right? Now the next thing is the hardness of water. There are basically I had probably discussed all this in the previous lecture as well. But what is the hardness of water? Hardness is the hardness in water prevents the formation of sufficient foam when used with soap. In the soil mechanics subject, we had discussed about surface tension and how a surface tension firm is found. So if the amount of hardness is there in water, that surface tension film will not break, and since it will not break, then the foam will not form, and without the formation of foam with the soap, we will not be able to wash properly our clothes as well as utensils, etc. This hardness in the form of the salts of calcium and magnesium also collects over the boilers. In the industry where boilers are used, the efficiency of boiler is greatly hampered by the presence of salts of calcium and magnesium. So we have to make sure that the water is not hard, so that it does not affect various parts of our systems, right? Another thing is that the hardness is known as temporary hardness if it is due to the bicarbonates of calcium and magnesium, as this can be easily removed by boiling water or adding it. So any hardness which is temporary in nature is by the bicarbonates of calcium and magnesium, right? By boiling, the carbon dioxide gas escapes and the insoluble carbonates are deposited, which cause scaling. If sulfate, chlorides and nitrates are present, they cannot be easily removed by boiling, and so such water requires water softening method. For example, if nitrogen is present in a wastewater sample, then we'll have to resort to nitrogen removal methods like nitrification and denitrification, which will yield nitrogen gas as an end product, which is not a problem for our environment. But if it is left untreated, nitrate and nitrite in the water sample can greatly affect human as well as the aquatic life. So such type of substances like sulfate, chlorides and nitrates are what make our wastewater treatment process, right? So we have to also make sure that we remove this type of wastewater and this type of substances from our wastewater before discharging it into a water stream, right? Here you can see an equation. H2CO3 was boiled and CO3 and CO3 is taken out from it, right? So you can see that chlorides are generally present in water in the form of sodium chloride, and their concentration above 250 milligram per liter produces a salty taste in drinking water. The chlorides can be measured in water by titrating the water with a standard silver nitrate solution using potassium chromate as indicator, right? So chlorides can be also removed. Now nitrogen content, as we had discussed, the nitrogen in water may occur in one or more forms. It may be in the form of free ammonia, it can be in the form of albuminoid nitrogen, it can be in the form of nitrite, and it can also be in the form of nitrate. The free ammonia indicates very first stage of decomposition of organic matter, right? When the organic matter decomposes, free ammonia is formed, producing a very foul smell, right? So whenever the decay starts of organic matter, the first thing that is coming out of it is ammonia, right, which gives the foul smell. Nitrogen content, the nitrite indicate the partly decomposed organic matter. After that nitrite is produced, the continuation of decomposition, and nitrates indicate the presence of fully oxidized organic matter, means the prior pollution condition. In potable water, the free ammonia undecomposed organic matter should not be more than 0.15 ppm, and the albuminoid nitrogen should not be more than 0.3 ppm parts per million, right? Then nitrogen may remain in the form of nitrate, but that too should not be more than 45 ppm, as a higher concentration called blue baby disease in the infants. Actually, the nitrate acts with the hemoglobin in the blood, which imparts red color and reduces it, thus converting the skin of the child to blue color, right? Nitrate is either measured by reduction to ammonia or by matching the colors produced with phenol disulfonic acid, right? So this is this here you can see the cases of blue baby disease. This is due to the presence of nitrate inside the water, potable water. Now when we talk about different properties of water, we had also discussed that there are microbiological parameters in which the water is categorized. So the presence of microorganisms, bacteria, virus, protozoa, worms present in water, it may be pathogenic or non-pathogenic. So what we do is we do MPN test for most probable number test, and we also do E. coli test. The presence of E. coli represents that the amount contains biological materials like bacteria or harmful pathogens also. So what we are testing wastewater sample, we also test it for the presence of E. coli under the microscope.